Aaaction. Welcome to Paul's Old Ass Movie Classics. I'm joined, of course, with me as always, Drew Stewart, my partner in crime on this journey of old movies. Drew, how you doing?
I'm well, sir. Good evening. I'm excited to talk about this movie.
Yeah, for sure. In today's movie, we'll be talking about M from 1931, and you can watch this now on Max. This is directed by Fritz Lang, who, if you do not know, is probably the most famous German director of all time. He was both a silent movie director as well as a prominent director that also did English films as well, and in America. He also directed Metropolis and The Big Heat. Big Heat was one of his highly rated films. Metropolis is, besides this film, is like the number 2 German film of all time. And he also wrote that along with his wife, Thea von Harbou, excuse me, and Egon Jacobsohn, the first non-Ghostbusters Egon I've ever met in my life. We're not met, but
Agreed. I love that.
I know. I was excited when I was like, oh, Egon. All right. This stars Peter Lorre, who obviously would be end up starring in many American English-speaking films, to include Maltese Falcon and what was the other one? Casablanca. And this also stars Ellen Widmann and Inge Landgut, or those exact pronunciations there. It's my German, many years of German coming into play there. The premise of this film: when the police in a German city are unable to catch a child murderer, other criminals join in the manhunt. So a pretty solid premise. IMDb rating 8.3. This was a super highly rated film. I don't have any box office numbers just because it was a German film, so it doesn't really talk about the budget. And this also wasn't released until 2 years later in the United States. It only made like 30 grand in the US. Don't know the German numbers or anything like that. So hard to tell monetarily if this was considered a success. How I do know they released it several times. I would imagine this was a success just because of the re-releases. There's several versions out there. And
certainly over its lifetime, I'm sure it earned him a pretty penny.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a crazy budget. I mean, a lot of it looked pretty practical, so I'm sure it did just fine. So yeah, Drew, let's get into it. What was your favorite thing about the film?
So I started last week by saying, I'm not sure. I am thrilled to say that I really like this movie. I'm very ashamed of myself that it took until the year 2024 for me to see it. Because I feel like it's always been at the top of a list or another of mine of films to see,
Yeah,
knowing it's such a classic. And so I'm sorry I didn't see it till now, but it was a thrill to see such a good classic movie that I had never seen before at this stage. So I really liked it. I thought you can tell it's an older film, right? You can even tell it was made in the
we'll give it away.
30s.
The black and white.
Well, yeah. Although, they sometimes make contemporary black and white. I
No,
love black and white. I know I've said that here before.
yeah,
I just love the depth and the richness that comes through in that thicker film. And I'm a major fan of black and white. And it's interesting. You said that just a minute ago. You kind of prefaced it by saying it looks very relatively practical, and I don't disagree. Like, it doesn't have incredibly lavish sets or things like that. But I will say that for me, my favorite part of this film was kind of sorry, dude. We have foster cats and they're everywhere. My favorite thing is taking it all together in totality, directing, cinematography, editing. Like, for the 1930s, we kind of said this with what was the Orson Welles film we watched recently?
the third man.
The Third Man, right? So that was impressive as well. But this, for me, for the 1930s, what an unbelievable storytelling journey we went on.
Yeah,
Visually, like, the story is great too, no doubt about it. But
yeah,
visually, it's stunning, and it's super mature feeling. We already are getting into the canted angles and the shots through the holes in the ceiling, and
yeah,
just really impressive filmmaking, and I loved it.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you nailed a lot of things on the head. This was very innovative for its time. some of the tracking shots, the you know the use of music as a cue for a character that had really never been done before. So a lot of things that this movie did were extremely innovative, and that's definitely what stood out as well. And it's entertaining. I mean, it just goes to show you really the impact that a good script has, and then just executing your game plan in a film. Because yeah, I don't think this movie had the highest budget of a film during that time period, but it it executed what it wanted to do and was extremely it was entertaining. It was really entertaining. I mean, I can't
I was on the edge of my seat.
yeah, I can't imagine
Last 10 minutes is astonishing.
yeah. I can't imagine watching this in the 1930s and you've never seen anything like this before.
And I know it was in German, so subtitle or whatever, but like it had swearing, which I didn't even think
Oh
was
yeah,
possible.
exactly.
I know it didn't have the Hollywood code because it was started in Germany, but like
Right.
so many things I just thought were so ahead of their time.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the swearing was what caught me a little off guard. I mean, like I said,
I
it
was
wasn't
shocked.
as impactful because it wasn't in English, but
Yeah.
still you're just reading it like, oh, okay,
I
like
was like,
yeah, they're going all
whoa,
out.
over and over again. He's just going to keep swearing at that door.
And even the subject matter. I mean, this is a very dark and gritty film.
It's the first serial killer film.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's
And
crazy.
yeah, I mean this kind of remind me of what was that Fincher film?
Um,
The Zodiac, I think it's just
oh, the
called
Zodiac. Zodiac.
yeah. Kind of remind me of that a little bit. But yeah,
Also, good.
I was really, really entertained, and you can see why this film has all the accolades. And yeah, I this is again, if you're into film classics and just being educated on film, this is an absolute must see. Make sure you check it out because this exceeded expectations because again, the entertainment factor. It's hard to be thoroughly entertained by especially just a purely non-English film,
Yeah.
but this worked very, very, very well.
I agree. For a movie this highly touted that I knew came so well regarded coming into it and being older, it absolutely exceeded my expectations. It was great. And Peter Lorre, like he is often, a character actor and when he made it to Hollywood and things,
Yeah,
and a great one. I love him. But
yeah,
he is phenomenal in this movie.
yeah, for sure. And it's also interesting too when you just put everything in context. This movie came out 2 years before the Nazis come into power, and that's just interesting by itself because they ended up banning this film 2 years later. Like it's almost immediately after when they came into power, they banned this film.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think of why Nazi Germany would ban this film, and the only thing I can think of is because the criminal element is very free thinking, and we've got to take this into our own hands. And obviously, Nazi
And
Germany is about power.
exactly. And not trusting the government to handle it like they can.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, apparently, like that, the underground elements were all real true, and the I guess this was a real kind of plausible situation because remember when the Nazis took over, this is before they were into massacring the Jews. That was not their initial party, platform. It was we're gonna bring Germany back to power because after World War One, they were just it was just the country was decimated, absolutely broke, everybody was poor. And so you're now starting to have Germany kind of rise again economically. And so that's right
100%.
around where
Yeah.
this takes place.
Yeah, it was all about hyper-nationalism. And they even reference it in there, like the Depression, that I think it was the bank building that had laid dormant since the Depression had started.
Yeah.
Kind of all those seeds that you're talking about that led to, the unfortunate rise of Hitler and the
Yeah.
Third Reich that then morphed into the more to the
Yeah.
hatred as the mantra that we see later.
Yeah, and it's also interesting too because Fritz Lang is Jewish and his wife is not, and that was actually part of the Nazi party. And so apparently, some of these things like you're saying, like the questionable behavior type things, he was very, concerned for good reason that that this may not be a good thing. And yeah, I don't know his whole detail on I think he immigrated
I-
in the 30s, if I'm
Why?
correct.
Why wouldn't you if you were a Jew in Germany? Like,
Yeah, and
stay
obviously
to the
you make
power.
films. I'm
And
pretty
yeah,
sure he
and
did
you had the
that.
opportunity to make films in an even more welcoming environment in Hollywood. Why wouldn't like
Yeah,
I'd, I'd get out as fast as I could.
yeah. I feel like we've already kind of answered this question, but does this movie hold up? I mean, I think we're both an ecstatic yes
Yep.
on that, right?
Stylistically, story, the whole morality question of like the criminals deciding that they had to go after this guy, and then the sort of like kangaroo court with the criminals, and then like the compelling work, honestly, like a really, sorry, I know we were gonna kind of skip over this, but
No, no,
the
no, you're good. You're good.
the compelling job that the defense attorney does, interestingly, even though when he first gets introduced, he's like, yeah, I'm here to defend you, but it's not going to do any good. But even then, him, like, you're not rooting for obviously Peter Lorre's character, but like the fact that he still gave, a full-throated defense, because at that time it was still the Weimar Republic, it was still a democracy, like
Yeah,
the rule of law. So even like seeing like certain code within the criminals, I understood why they wanted to get rid of him, but like there was still this notion that like we should maybe let the system work it out.
yeah,
All of those themes are still super relevant today.
yeah. Very, very in movie, very similar to, you might hate this reference, but like Revenge of the Sith, when
No,
you
it's fine.
know, when they actually capture Palpatine, Mace Windu was like, no, we have to eliminate him. Like he's too powerful. We can't let him go to the courts. He owns the courts.
Yeah.
And then, Anakin was like, no, he has to go through the court system. That's not the Jedi way. So, you have that kind of interesting debate there. And yeah. Uh, Contemporary comparison. I'm curious what you had for this.
Um, it's interesting, and my contemporary comparison is gonna um kind of actually be a person that I would have star in it as well. It for me it was, I think it's called Prisoners. Um,
With Jake Gyllenhaal
Jake
and
Gyllenhaal and Paul Dano and
yeah.
what's his face?
Hmm.
Uh, what is his name? Wolverine.
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman, thank you. Who, by
Mhm.
the way, I always forget how varied he can be. Like he is
Yeah.
incredibly diverse. Um, Reminding me of that, right? Like the kids go missing, and then it's like a little bit of vigilante justice while they're trying to decide, like, try to find them, who's responsible. A really weird, mentally ill kind of character in Paul Dano. So for me, I had some passenger vibes, or
Yeah.
prisoner.
Yeah. I mean, this is not the contemporary comparison, but we talked about it earlier, but this definitely reminded me a lot of The Third Man and just the whole kind of manhunt thing, in kind of in the netherworld. And that was definitely one comparison that I had. Um, Contemporary one, I mean, The Fugitive, it kind of reminded me a little bit of The Fugitive
Yeah.
in a way. I know that's not necessarily the most contemporary film that we have, but I didn't have any like,
Compared to the third man, it's downright modern.
yeah. Um, I, I mean, there's definitely a part that also felt a little like Batman-ish too, like
Yeah.
whether it was the Batman or even like the original one with the Joker, Nicholson, Jack Nicholson. Um,
Which I would love to watch. We should maybe watch that on here. It's not old enough yet, but I'd
oh no,
love to
I mean we would
revisit.
do that.
I'd
We would
love
just
to
do that.
revisit that movie.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. I mean, I know the Dark Knight's up there that we're gonna be doing. So, yeah. And then, should this movie be remade today, and who should it star?
I think it's kind of, so my short answer is yes, I would love to see it remade. But it doesn't need to be. It's
Yeah.
kind of a perfect film as is. But I wouldn't mind seeing sort of a modern interpretation of it, just because I think the story's so good. And
Yeah.
in English, right? Like maybe in English
Yeah.
it'd be different.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this very carefully as well. I would say, does it have the ability to translate today? 1000%. Should it be remade? I'm going to go with no, only as a true, like one to one, only because Fritz Lang, they wanted him to remake it in English and he was kind of against it. And so I always have kind of just a respect level if if he didn't feel like his, and he
Strong.
wrote it too, you know what I mean? If he was just a director, I wouldn't necessarily care so much, but since this really is his
It's his
baby,
complete baby, yeah.
yeah, then I would be kind of I feel like you'd be going against his wishes with doing a pure remake. Now, like I mentioned, should it be borrowed from and used as like homages? 100%. But to be a pure one, I would almost say no for that respect level. So that's gonna be my answer.
I'm totally good with that.
Um, yeah, and so I mean, the only I was trying to think of who has like a very unique look to him because I think that was like a big part of Peter Lorre in
Lorre.
this film was he had that kind of creepiness, but also like he was just a great actor too, and that's not an easy thing to do.
So I think Paul Dano would be great. He's creepy.
Yeah, yeah, and he's played
A creep.
several
Yeah.
killers and
It's
unique
almost too
characters.
obvious because he kind of always plays that, but
No,
not a lot.
actually, that's really good. I like that one. Paul Dano's like would be perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. So again, make sure you check this out. You can find it on HBO Max.
We gotta do our list, no?
No, no, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I'm segueing into that there, buddy.
sorry.
Yeah, all good. So our
Let me
list,
interrupt.
yeah. So our list today, people, we were debating on whether to do 1930s, but because this movie is not English, and there probably is not another pure circumstance where we're gonna have foreign language films. So we're like, well, why don't we do that?
Hater.
So, and I think Drew is obviously one of the best in the pool of people that we have for this category. So, best foreign language films. What do you got?
I I geeked out on this, man. You know me. Like when
Yeah,
you
for
said it,
sure.
I'm down. So it's hard. It was really hard because there's a lot that I really like, and
Oh,
I
I forgot
know
to ask you too. Did you do pre 1980 like to stay in this genre, or did you do all time? I'm fine.
I did pre 1980.
Okay, no new films. I can do that. I can do that.
Because I was thinking about like Amelie and some great more
Yeah,
modern
yeah,
films.
yeah.
But I did mostly older, and I kind of chose them in the similar vein of for me of M, which were not just non-English films, but films that kind of really took cinema in a new direction,
Yeah.
and kind of either was a coming out party for a director or really in some instances kind of ushered in new techniques in filmmaking. And so for me, I just want to do one honorable mention if that's okay.
Yeah,
It's called The
go for it.
Bicycle. I didn't want to leave off entirely an Italian film. The Bicycle Thieves, set in right after World War II in Rome,
Yeah.
is really, really good, and a
Yeah.
great Italian film. But so for me, number five is a film. A lot of these I watched in college and in film classes.
Yeah, same.
This first one is Shohei Imamura, and it's a Japanese film called Vengeance Mine. And it's similarly to M about a serial killer, in the otherwise like very buttoned up sort of Japanese culture, and kind of watches this guy go off the rails. And also there's like romance involved. It's beautiful to look at and it's frightening and it's a great story and it's really well made. And Imamura is, awesome. One of my favorite Japanese directors, probably, he's not Kurosawa, but
Yeah.
anyway, great film. Number five for me.
Nice. So I'm gonna go. So my list, I'm not gonna say this is necessarily my top five favorite foreign
Right.
language films, I'm also adding significance as well. So I did a nice hybrid version of that.
Okay.
So my number five is going to be The Grand Illusion, which is a World War One film,
Yeah.
and this is directed by Jean Renoir. But this was again, this is like a classic kind of film school film, and this I believe starts. I don't know if it starts the French New Wave, but he's definitely one of the first like French directors, one of the
Yeah.
most significant French directors, and so I went with that one. I'm not gonna say it's a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's a significant film. So that was my number five. My number four, and this is French New Wave, is 400 Blows. Uh, again, I don't that one can be a little rough in terms of pacing, but it's super significant. It's Francois
True.
Truffaut, correct, right?
Yeah.
And this is the start of the French New Wave, and that is a very significant time period in film history. And so I think, you could argue it's probably higher, maybe in significance, but I don't think it's more entertaining than the other one. So that's where I have it at four.
Got it. For me, number four is a Belgian film by what?
I didn't even know there were Belgian films. I've
It's a
never even.
Belgian filmmaker. She was Belgian, but like part of sort of like a new wave and absolutely one of the first like very staunch feminist filmmakers that saw any sort of like wide release and acclaim. This is maybe the most esoteric film ever made. It's called Jean Dielman 23 Quai du Commerce, Brussels. But it's
Sure, you write
about
that down, people.
it's about a Belgian housewife, well, a mom who has a kid, and it is kind of her day-to-day life. Like you spend significant amount of time like watching her make dinner, but she also has to like be a prostitute to sort of supplement their income.
Yeah.
It is incredible how claustrophobic it starts to feel watching what this woman goes through and the lengths that she goes to sort of trapped in her femininity, and it's an incredible feminist statement, and it's a really really well made, perfectly executed film. It's really long but it's really good. Chantal Akerman, she's awesome. And the number three for me is another Japanese film. This one is by Kurosawa, and it's not Seven Samurai, which I know is often considered his best, but this one for me is Rashomon,
Hmm.
which was an incredibly important film to me when I first saw it. In 1950, it was an incredibly new take on filmmaking, a little bit nonlinear, a little bit sort of like truth in the eye of the beholder. It just a really, really, really great film.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent choice. I went with my number three. You already stole it in terms of made it your
Oh,
honorable
sorry.
mention, but it's Bicycle Thief. Bicycle Thief, if for those that don't know, was the inspiration for Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And so anytime you get your film remade and you're able to add Pee-wee Herman to it, I think that's and obviously that was a huge box office success too.
Yeah.
But Bicycle Thief is also, again, just one of the um, most important films in, you know, cinematic history. And that's why I wanted to do it. I'm trying to look. Do you remember who directed that one?
Did not write it down. Oh, I did. It's Vittorio De Sica.
I think you nailed it. I think it's The Bicycle Thief, right?
It's Bicycle Thieves, I think. I always say the Bicycle Thief, but I think it's Bicycle Thieves. I looked
There is a 48 version, but I don't think that's the original.
that is. It's the one right after World War II. Bicycle Thieves, and it's the director is Vittorio De Sica, and it stars Lamberto Maggiorani is the dad. And he's phenomenal. This guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right. I always thought it was The Bicycle Thief.
So did I. And maybe we see it in different translations depending on where you stream it.
No, because it does say The Bicycle Thief after that. That's weird.
Yeah. Anyway, I agree with you. It's a great film.
And then my number two, I'm gonna go with this film, M. I think not only again for the entertainment factor, but the cultural impact, cinematically and all that good stuff. You add it all combined, I think. And I would not argue if this was anybody's number one. I think my number one is going to be the most impactful, but this one is up there.
Okay. For my number two, I went with French. Finally, I had to leave off some of my favorite French films, but I went with the great Jean-Luc Godard, and I went with Breathless.
I don't think I ever saw that one.
There's quite a few that you can choose from him, but this really did kind of kick off the new wave. Stylistically, sort of in its spirit, it's beautifully shot, beautiful story, very, very different, just like a completely new way of looking at filmmaking. And obviously Godard goes on to become iconic in so many different ways. But
Yeah.
Breathless is my number two.
Yeah, I saw that on several lists. I just don't remember if I saw it, so I didn't. But I wouldn't have. He was a guy I wanted to include, but I just couldn't squeeze him
You
in.
put Truffaut in there. He's great. He's
Yeah.
like they're all in the same vein.
Yeah. And then your number one?
Oh, sorry. My number one. I did what I don't ever do. That's why I snuck the honorable mention in. I put M on there.
Okay.
Given the fact that this was in the 30s,
Yeah.
given its technical
Probably the first real impactful foreign language film
yeah.
in cinematic history. Like I don't recall film this early
And
besides silent films, which are obviously easier to translate because it's just
Yeah.
title cards.
And even by Hollywood standards, this is as good as filmmaking gets for the
Yeah.
time, and even for significant time afterwards.
Yeah.
I was really impressed by this. And the more I read about it and understand sort of like what it meant in the zeitgeist, I think it's a great film.
Yeah. My number one, and so I did pick a film, but it's also I picked three films, and
Cheater.
I know, but the film itself is Seven Samurai, Akira
Okay.
Kurosawa.
Yeah.
I think there's nobody that has been more influential to American cinema and other directors than Kurosawa. People always borrowed his ideas. The Magnificent Seven has 20 films that have spawned off of Seven Samurai. So it is Seven Samurai is my actual official number one pick, but throw in Rashomon, throw in Yojimbo. I'm fine with either of them. I just think Kurosawa is the most influential and best foreign language director of all time. And, everybody that's almost ever made a film has somehow seen Kurosawa at some point and has been influenced by him. So
I felt guilty only having him at 3, and it was hard to not name Seven Samurai, but I preferred Rashomon. But
yeah,
Seven Samurai is a masterpiece and absolutely probably more influential.
Yeah, I want to rewatch those. I want to watch those three films again because it's been a hot minute since I've seen them all. But yeah, it's crazy, which is why I literally could have put those three in my top 5 and not look back. If I'm going to more like what I would prefer to watch, I would throw all those three on there because I love Japanese cinema and just medieval Japanese time period.
This is more modern than that. It's like in the 1960s, like set in the 60s, 70s, but you should definitely check out Vengeance is Mine by your in memoriam. You'll like it a lot.
Okay. Sounds good. Maybe we'll put it on the list here. Who knows?
It's been ages since I've seen it.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Our next film, we talked about it last week, and we're gonna come through on our word that we wanted to watch it, especially after doing last week's list of the best 1950s films. But one of the movies on the list that we had to choose from that neither of us had seen was The Defiant Ones from 1958. It's directed by the great Stanley Kramer and stars Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier, and that's going to be available on Tubi So if you want to check it out before we do the podcast, you can find it on Tubi now. So the Defiant ones, that will be for next week. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you catch our other episodes. We did Salag 17 along with The Bridge on the River Kwai. So make sure you check those out as well. And with that, Drew, that will be a cut. Thanks, guys.